everyone. Welcome to the Mill Valley Film Festival. I'm Sterling Hedgpeth, the programming manager for the festival, and we're exceptionally proud to have Doc Severinsen here as a guest. Thanks for seeing Never Too Late. And with us also is, as you saw in the film, Chris Botti, another trumpeter. So let's talk a little bit originally just about the film. Doc, what was most important to you as far as conveying the sense of musicianship and conveying the sense of dedication to your craft that people may not necessarily associate you with if they just know you from The Tonight Show?
Well, I don't know. That question kind of has a lot of content in it there. You want to take it point by point?
Sure. I mean, in terms of just when the directors first approached you, what kind of role did you want to make sure music played a part? Not just your celebrity, but the music itself played a part.
When it was suggested to me by my daughter Nancy that she had seen the boss man Kevin at a big party, and they were renewing old times, and it led to this whole thing. And sometimes things start out very simply like that, and you get walking along doing your thing, and you say, my God, is this really happening? And it was really happening.
Well, we're glad it happened. Chris, how did you get involved? I know you admire Doc greatly, but how did you get involved in the actual film?
Well, when you opened your question, you asked the thing about like music and celebrity and The Tonight Show. And I would argue that for Doc and trumpet players throughout the world, there's no difference between Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, or, like when you really know what that craft is, and you sit there on your couch, whatever, and you're a young teenager, and you see that, you hear that, it's a profound experience. And to know it's just so much larger than the television program. It's the artistry that goes behind his trumpet playing, and how legendary it remains to this day, that sound and his beautiful playing. So I'm just happy to be a part of it and to be here to pay my absolute profound respect to the great Doc Severinsen.
Doc, I would say probably the first time I was ever envious of a studio audience was when I would watch The Tonight Show, because they would cut to commercial and I wanted to hear you play during those minutes that you were off the air. What was it like for the studio audience? How into it did they get into the music and the performance?
Well, I know we had a lot of people that came and got tickets to go to the show, and they were coming because they wanted to hear the band live, and they just got the little bits and pieces here and there, and so that, while it may seem a little strange, it's true. And I remember when I took over the band, I played in the band for a lot of years, and it was a frightening experience to go from that trumpet section. It's a walk of about 10 feet down to be in front of the band. And it's a lot farther than 10 feet, I'll tell you that. It's a whole lifetime.
Now, you appear to have just such natural charisma and such a natural way of getting along with people. What kind of skills did you have to learn to be a front man in order to represent the band beyond just your musicianship, but as far as your way to present yourself to the audience?
Well, I think that had already been settled before I made the move to be in front of the band. I was one of those kids growing up in a small town in Eastern Oregon that I wasn't big enough to fight and too nervous to steal. And so I became a kind of a wise guy. I always liked to see the humorous side of things. And when I took over the band, I didn't have any reputation about what clothing I would wear, but I just did what was natural. I got some pretty far out clothing to wear. And at that time, you had the revolution on the college campuses and throughout our society that had to do with the times they are a-changing. And it was the Beatles and all of that stuff. And I don't know, it was just all around me. And I stopped in a store there in New York. I saw some unbelievable ties in the window. And I went in and bought 3 or 4 of them. And that night on the show, I wore a really wild tie. This is my first night as the band leader. And Johnny went after it. And he had a ball with that. And so that was part of my job, was to, I realized they don't want me in a blue suit. And I didn't want to be in a blue suit, So that was the way that all went down. And it just built as it went along. Johnny was a real artist at taking the people that he chose to be with them and use them to their best advantage and his. And it was a ball. It was just a good time.
I think your sense of style was the easiest way to just cross generation gaps so effortlessly by showing that you had a lot of humor, a lot of playfulness, and a lot of really, forward-thinking kinds of senses about just how you want to present yourself. Chris, do you remember some specific performances on The Tonight Show that really, as far as music guests, especially music guests that joined the band, that really stood out, that really kind of made an impression on you as a burgeoning musician?
Well, I mean, every night when Doc they'd zoom in on him and him playing, the first number, whatever it was before they interviewed him with the quick hello. That's what I was focused on. I mean, obviously there was Sinatra and everyone and Johnny Mathis and everyone sounded great. But again, as a kid that wanted to play the trumpet and looking up at that screen and seeing and hearing that unbelievable playing. And then of course, the showmanship, which you've been speaking about and stuff. It was mesmerizing. It was incredible.
We have a wonderful moment where the two of you are in a recording studio doing a beautiful Gershwin duet. What is it like to play, to kind of trade off, hand off solo from one piece to another, from one musician to another? How much do you coordinate in advance, and how much do you just sort of let the spirit just kind of move you?
No coordination.
I'll let Chris answer that.
Well, I just think I think like jazz music or, the trumpet playing in that style, there's really very, it's a craft that you learn before you get on the stage, and there's a level of, you're putting in your homework and your hours and stuff like that. When you get on the stage, there's nothing really per se worked out. You just sort of wing it. And then, whatever happens. But there's a language there that of course, we've all studied. And so it's different than like in the acting world where there's, you hit your marks and you speak lines and stuff like that. And in playing music, all that prep work is done from the time you pick this up as a kid until whatever time you have the great opportunity to play with Doc, So you just kind of go for it. And I think we just kind of, I don't know what we did, Doc, but it was fun.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. You were very kind to me. Chris is young and hot, and he could have cleaned my clock. But he sensed that we had a thing to do to create something together. And some people can never seem to understand that. And Chris just, bam, he had it, you know, and it was just a nice thing to do together. Nobody was trying to cut anybody. And we were just doing our thing.
Yeah.
One more question before we bring everyone else in. I think this film also shows in vivid detail how physically demanding being a trumpeter is. Can you both, we see you in the gym working out, and it's pretty remarkable. It's for me, that's the most inspiring thing, just to see that. Can you talk a little bit about how that's sustained itself over your career, Doc? And Chris, do you have any specific exercises or protocols that you go through just to kind of keep your strength up over a performance or over a longer period of tour or something?
Well, I mean, for me, the trumpet is so unbelievably demanding. Nobody really realizes that unless they play or unless they know you well enough. But I mean, it's I can't tell you how many trumpet players that I've run into that, you know, I met Doc this year, that year, this place, that place. And it's always in a stairwell with Doc practicing, you know, hours and hours and hours and hours, and the physical part of it. And it's always something I've been aware of, and it's been a great inspiration. But so now, especially in the last few years, I've really made that training and gym and yoga and running and all that stuff a major priority. Not quite as much as actually practicing, but it's getting there, you know. And it's a very unusual thing that Doc has this epic impact on the instrument for so many years and still plays incredible, you know. And it just doesn't happen in sports or anything like that. And it's a great kind of inspiration that I get from seeing Doc and being able to meet him and hang out.
How's your core holding up?
I'll go now.
How's your core holding up, Doc?
My core is not up to snuff right now. You know, with the pandemic that's going on, I couldn't go to the gym anymore. I mean, I wanted to, but Kathy wouldn't let me because she said, you know, and with all due respect, she said, you know, at your age or any age really, with the way things are going nowadays, you have to be very careful. And I'm going to the gym to get more healthy and to feel good and be able to play the trumpet better. So why wind up killing myself? You got to be very careful nowadays. So I miss the gym a lot.
Okay. And here we are with the rest of the crew of Never Too Late. Joining us, of course, are the directors, if you can just wave, Kevin Bright and Jeff Consiglio. He's a producer along with Ariana Garfinkel. And Nancy Severinsen is a co-producer and also a music supervisor and Doc's daughter. And then Brad Allgood is the editor. And unfortunately, Chris has a gig. We have to say goodbye, but thank you so much for joining us, Chris. We really appreciate it.
Best of luck to everyone, okay? Fantastic.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll have a time.
Come on, Chris.
Bye-bye.
See you someplace soon.
Okay.
Starting with Kevin and Jeff and Ariana, how did this get started? You know, Doc's been around forever. And it's always been exciting to see him working. But what was the inspiration to actually make the movie that we saw today?
Well, you know, in my house, literally for every year that the show is on, my dad was up at 11:30 watching The Tonight Show. I believe it at one time it was 11 o'clock it even used to start at. And so as I got older and was able to stay up with my dad, or my practice of sneaking around the corner, or I had this periscope thing that I could watch over my dad's shoulder without him knowing that I was there. And that's where I met Doc Severinsen. And through the years of, The Tonight Show, let's face it, was the only place to be on late night television. There wasn't 100 channels of competition. It was the only place to be. And I was always impressed by Doc, not just as a player and his versatility as a player, which, the more I knew about music, the more I understood Doc. But man, that clothing and, his sense of humor and his willingness to, just put it all out there and not hold anything back. He said it, whether it was sailing to the moon or headed to the toilet, Doc would just put it out there and own it. And so when I talked to Nancy and, when I asked, how's your dad? I knew he had to be up there in 90, and it's a delicate question to ask about a person that age. And to find out that he was not only alive, but still playing, that was like, wow, that's already inspiring to me. And that's how it kind of started.
And how did you get involved, Jeff and Ariana?
Kevin came to me and told me basically what he just told you. And he had this idea of, Doc's up in years. Let's do a short documentary where we put him in the studio. He records a new album and we do clips of The Tonight Show. It'll be a short film. Then we met Doc, fell in love with him, and found out that this guy's on the road more than most other musicians half his age. And all of a sudden we realized, heck with the studio, let's go on the road with this guy. And it ballooned from this little film to this large film, which is a perfect segue for Ariana, because she was tasked with building the framework for a small, production. And then Kevin says one day, we're going on the road. Here we go. And Ariana had to figure out, how do you take this little animal and make it this big?
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, Kevin and Jeff and I have worked together on a number of projects, including Best and Most Beautiful Things, which was at Mill Valley Film Festival in 2016. So when Kevin had this idea, we all knew we wanted to work together again. But I think just seeing what Doc was up to, the vitality and the art and the music, and bringing that kind of light into the world was also very exciting. And yeah, we just jumped on the road. We had a much bigger story than we ever imagined, but it was a ton of fun, and we just
what? We had a life together.
Yeah, we did.
Nothing else. Good God Almighty, we had a good time.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
We had some good food too, Doc.
Oh yeah.
Good food.
And you picked up the check.
Thank you.
That was me.
Doc, after a while, did you just get so used to the cameras that you didn't notice when they were around the home or when they were on the stage or backstage with you?
That's a hard question to answer. I don't think there ever comes a time that you're not aware of the camera and, okay, it's on you now. You better come up with something. That was the way on the Tonight Show. Johnny would look over at me, and if I didn't have something ready, I didn't have a good night's sleep at all. It became a family, and boy, I miss you guys. Why don't you ever drop by the house?
We'd be trying to film him doing something, and he would turn to the camera to tell us a joke or talk about where we're going to go for dinner time. We'd be like, Doc, we're trying to make a movie here. Can you just go over there and do your thing? And he's like, well, what do you want? I mean, it's like, you remember what we did last night? So it was never really work to him. It was always family and joy and just being together. We had to squeak in production while Doc was just living amongst us. He's so much fun, that guy.
Yeah, I will say that in the experience of doing this, Doc, one of the places where you're not aware of the camera is when you're playing. You are so focused centrally on everything that's come out of your mouth between your lips, that you're not worried about where anything else is in the world. You're just totally in that zone.
Yeah, you're right about that. How do I put this in a nice way? The trumpet, she is a jealous bitch. And if you don't be careful,
tell me how you really feel.
You can get in trouble real fast if you don't do your thing and practice, take care of business.
Speaking of family, Nancy, you and Brad had an enormous task of trying to wrap your head around all the music, all the footage, all the archival stuff, all the concerts. IMDb says Doc appeared in more than 5,000 episodes of The Tonight Show. What was it like going through all that footage? What was the Tonight Show archive like to find all these golden moments between Doc and Johnny? And what were some of the big challenges about assembling this into one really nice, tight piece?
You know, I would say that task pretty much fell with Jeff and Brad, and what they came up with. They went through tons and tons of footage. We were so grateful to have cooperation with the Carson Company and providing material for us to be able to view. And what they came up with was amazing. I applaud them. It's really great to see everybody too. It's been a while. So it's really nice to hear all the comments. And since time has passed and we can step back and have a little perspective on what the process was and the experience, it's really nice to be able to say that it leaves us with such a sense of joy. We're so glad we did it. There was so much love involved. And I would hope that that's what comes across in the film, is there was a great deal of love in putting it together and in every moment of filming. And I thank you so much, Jeff and Ariana and Kevin, oh my gosh, for allowing me to be.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on now. Let me do a little horn tooting of my own for you and for Brad, because let me tell you the assignment that I gave them. At some point, I came up with the brilliant idea that Doc has an incredible catalog of music. Unbelievable, over 50 albums, easily over 50 albums. And I said to these two, I want every transition, every piece of score in this film to be from a Doc Severinsen record. It wasn't until I got the first estimate of what that was going to cost that I understood what I was really asking for. But by that point, it was too late. I was creatively committed, and Brad on the editing part just blew it off the charts, and Nancy on getting all of this music cleared from all these various sources and masters and everything, just pulled off a miracle to put it even in the range of getting it done on a documentary budget. So these two were absolutely indispensable to the final product of this film.
Can I say a word about one person? Jeff Consiglio, Johnny's nephew.
Yes, absolutely. Would be impossible without him. His generosity was unbelievable. Would not have happened without Jeff Consiglio. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, I just want to add, for me, it was an education. I listened to probably every one of Doc's albums that's out there. And there are so many, especially from the 60s, that I think are absolutely fantastic. I think from the Command, on the Command label. They're hard to find, but if you can find them, go buy them. They're absolutely fantastic. And as far as the Carson archives, I grew up, I caught the tail end of Carson in the 90s. Or 80s and up until 92, but hadn't seen anything from the 60s or 70s. So going through thousands and thousands of episodes it wasn't like I was going to work. It was like I was watching television every day, and just laughing out loud while I was editing and finding these small moments between Johnny and Doc and guests that I had heard of but didn't know the names because I hadn't grown up in that era. It was just such a fun project. And one of the interesting things is, and Kevin might be able to speak to this, is from 62 to 72, all of the Tonight Show is missing. There are no full episodes of the Tonight Show from that period. And
it's one of the
fascinating
saddest stories in show business. It's one of the saddest stories in show business. Basically what happened was, you know, in the very early part of the Tonight Show, there was no videotape at all, and there was only kinescopes. And 2-inch videotape came about in the 60s. And that's when they started recording the Tonight Show every night and playing it back rather than always having to do it live. So after about 7 years, I think it was, when NBC finally decided to move the Tonight Show out of New York to California, there was, well, what are we going to do with all these tapes? And somebody came up with the brilliant notion, it's all worthless. Just wipe them and reuse them. Oh. So they were all destroyed. And the only thing that exists from those years are things that come from collectors, because there are no masters to be had. So these are people who filmed kinescopes off of their screens at home, and that's how you get access to that period, with the exception of a couple of shows that were preserved.
Yeah.
What was? Oh.
You know, Kevin, I was thinking about when your dad was on the Tonight Show.
That's right. There is that deeper connection.
What a way
my dad didn't.
You know, especially considering what it was that he did, and I don't think they set it up. You know, like, oh, this he really is saying something, but. Don't believe too much of it, but he came out there like he was just a regular guest. Johnny asked him some question, and Jesse.
So my dad made 2 appearances on the Tonight Show. My dad was a double talking comic in another life. And he was introduced once as the vice president of Con Edison to explain the New York blackout. And another time he came out as an official from the IRS to explain how to file your last minute taxes. And it's all malaprops and gibberism, and nothing makes any sense. But you think he's saying something, but it's actually, you know, just nonsense. But between his physicality and his eye bulging and everything else that my dad had in his bag of tricks, he had a couple of successful shots, and watching my dad on the Tonight Show was just an incredible experience.
If I recall correctly, he didn't.
He's on the 60s tapes that were white.
What's that? What did you say?
He was on the tapes that were white. He was on the tapes that were wiped out.
Well, I mean, I wish they still had it because it was hilarious. You know, they introduced them like they didn't explain that he did this double talk thing. And so he sits down and Johnny asks him a question, and Johnny stayed in his thing and your dad stayed in his thing. And I don't think people knew that, you know, they didn't realize that he wasn't saying anything. He had a language all his own. It was really hilarious.
So Jeff and Kevin, what was the timeline? How long did you follow Doc, and how long did you shoot, and what was your post-production timeline look like too?
You got Jiggy.
We filmed for almost exactly a year, I think. Again, not planning to film for a year, but we filmed for a year and edited probably, Brad, I think we would say maybe 8 months total window of time, because there was some pause in production, a pause in post-production at one point while we collected some last minute materials. So it was about a 2-year full, about 2 years, right? 2 years, a little over 2 years. Ariana, didn't we hit it 2 anniversaries?
Yes, and we were set to premiere in March at festivals in the spring. And of course, that was not meant to be with the state of the world. And we all wanted to be there together in person and celebrate Doc. And so we waited, but we're really thrilled now that we can just bring it to audiences in their homes when they need it most. So we're rolling out this is the beginning of the festival run, California premiere.
Well said.
Yeah.
Doc, what did you think of the film? Was it what you expected it to be, or did it take you by surprise in terms of some of the stuff they covered, or maybe some of the stuff you don't remember them shooting of you?
Well, I didn't have any expectations because I don't see myself as an actor, or comic, or anything. I'm comfortable when I got that trumpet in my hands, and other than that, who knows? And it grew on me very quickly, and it was like another family in my life. And being on the road together, it was just a very special experience. So I have the big bands and the jazz groups that are part of my family. I have my family that's a family, like my daughter Nancy, and then I have the staff that went out and did all of this. And I didn't realize exactly how I felt about it till I went to see some of the footage before it was all put together, I guess, but at Kevin's house. And I'm watching thinking, oh, wow, this is good. I like this. And all of a sudden, I realized I was crying. Not a few tears. I was really shook up. I mean, they reached inside me and pulled stuff out. And so I don't have to go to the psychiatrist anymore.
One bill down.
Nancy, some of those most powerful moments are relating to the family or families that he's had over the years. And so we're speaking of archives. There's some wonderful photographs and other kinds of ephemera related to his past and his family's. What was it like going through that material, and did that bring up other kinds of memories or thoughts that you weren't expecting?
Well, the entire experience was reaching back, and it was really fulfilling and rewarding to do so, to capture the memories, to try to search and find every little bit that we could. I think that there was far more there as far as the story goes than what we were able to capture. It's possible we could do more films, but finding what was most appropriate to put together in the film, that's certainly credited to Jeff and Brad and Kevin as far as the content goes. I can say for me, when I watched the film the first time, oh my gosh, the first frame, I started crying and I never stopped for the whole 83 minutes. I can recall on the road also experiencing such overwhelming emotion. And I will specify one time in particular. This is when we were in Louisville at the University of Louisville in Kentucky, and Dad was set to do a 2-hour masterclass. He stood up for 2 hours in front of trumpet players and the staff as well. And he spoke not just about the mechanics of playing, but what it is in your heart to play. And even now, as I recall this, it chokes me up a little bit, because what Dad was saying was everything positive you could possibly want to guide your life with. I found it to be so inspiring, and it made me so happy that he's my dad.
Well,
Wow.
That was great.
Thank you, Dad.
That's very sweet. Very sweet, Nancy.
yeah.
Nancy brings up a great point. Thank you. That was beautifully expressed. But Nancy brings up a great point for Brad and Kevin and Jeff. Were there other things that you loved in the movie that you couldn't find space for? You had a really great moment or a scene or an encounter, and in the interest of cohesiveness or economy or just really moving the story along, you just couldn't find the space for it, but you really loved it. Was there anything that comes to mind about that?
Well, For one thing, we have something from every single day of production in the film. So we were very efficient in that way. But really, I think, Brad mentioned this once before. I think it's true that if anything that we loved couldn't be in there, if there was anything in that category, it was more of Doc's playing, especially like Brad, you mentioned when he plays Georgia, which is a big, big moment in the film. Every time we played that in the edit room, we would just press play and sit back and watch. But you have to move the story along. It's not a music film, so you have to bring it down in order to keep the story going. That's what really hurt. Also, Summertime in the studio with Chris, another one. But most of these performances on these stages with these kids at these universities, it was just, it was a show. It was a really mesmerizing, rewarding show at all times. And we couldn't make that show into a movie. We had to combine them all down. So for me, it's the music moments. Right, Brad?
What did you?
Yeah, I definitely think
Brad,
so.
I was just going to say, what did you want?
Oh, I would love to allow that arrangement of Georgia to play out in its entirety. I mean, it's one of my favorite arrangements of Georgia that I've heard. And Doc's playing has so much soul and so much just experience and life in it. And I would just, I wish people could hear actually the entirety of that concert in North Texas. I mean, the UNT 1 O'Clock Lab Band is probably the premier big college big band in the country. I mean, they are absolutely incredible. I wish we could include, we could make an entire film of all the concerts. But yeah, that for sure.
And the other memorable night, too. I'm sorry, just had to say about the New York at the cutting room when.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, when absolutely. Blair and Gray. This is my niece and nephew who have a band, and Dad sat in with their band at the cutting room in New York one night, and that night was, I think, the best night of my life. It was everything coming together, everybody's musicality coming together, the joy of recording this for posterity. And we had family members that ranged from 95 to 3 at that show. So it was everything wonderful.
For me, one of the things that didn't make the film, because in a sense it would have been redundant, we have that great scene with Doc giving a lesson to the young man from the Perkins School for the Blind. But there was another teaching scene that was really great, and I think it showed another side of Doc. The young 13-year-old trumpet player, I think she's a trumpet champion, Sophie. Yeah. And when you see Doc nurturing this young woman and taking her in literally minutes from playing one way to playing very differently, when Doc told her, no, where's that breath? Where is it coming from? And literally within minutes, she was playing good, but she's a champion. She's already great. And I think the other thing was Doc's sensitivity in relating to a young woman and how he understood that, hey, you got to be better than those guys. There's too many guys playing trumpet. You got to get out there and you really got to compete. So
I can tell you something about that. I had 4 teenage daughters at once. And all I can remember, it was just a blizzard of pantyhose and sweaters. and so you can't put me in a situation with kids where it's going to be anything less than a joy, really.
Oh, that's awesome.
I agree. And he really was empowering her, I think, is what you were getting at, Kevin. It was beautiful.
Well, Jeff, Kevin, Ariana, Nancy, Brad, and especially Doc, thank you so much for sharing this film with us. Thank you so much for being part of Mill Valley Film Festival. And Doc, if you want to say, give any last words for our audience, you get to close this out.
Well, it's been a pleasure. It was all my pleasure. And I'm looking over Kevin's right shoulder. I see in the background Palisades Park. I remember.
I was waiting for you to notice it.
Oh, man. I was I was hungry. I don't mean I didn't need a little money. I was hungry. I needed a lot of money. And I had just gotten to New York, and I was playing with a Latin band over there, Noro Morales. And that's just, you know, I see that sign, and it isn't just a little reminder of those times. I can remember what life was like then. And it wasn't anything like Kevin has, and all of you have gone on to be a part of my life.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your life. Thank you to everyone for being so creative and generous with his life. To everyone else, thank you for joining us. Be sure to enjoy the rest of the festival, and have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mill Valley.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mill Valley. Be there next year.